I'm Ben Sebastian here flying solo today for this week's Written on the Edge Season 9, Episode 38 interview. I'll be talking with Paul Lamb and discussing his novels One Match Fire and Parent Imperfect. So, let's get to know my guest. Paul Lamb has a cabin in Missouri at the edge of the Ozark Mountains. The cabin waits most of 2 hours away from his home in suburban Kansas City. The irony is, he doesn't write there. The setting seems ideal, doesn't it? A one-room cabin with a shady porch overlooking a sparkling lake. At the end of a road no one needs to come down, deep in a trackless forest. The only sounds that intrude are the occasional lowing of cattle from the ranch to the east, or maybe a distant chainsaw. Paul has a chair and a table and pencils and notebooks there. He has uninterrupted solitude. He has everything a writer needs, and yet Paul cannot write at his cabin. All he feels is the desire to go outside, into the forest, down to the lake, along the paths. He wants to see what bird is calling, whose shadow is floating across the ground, or what he heard scampering through the leaf litter. Paul wants to feel the sun on his skin, or listen to the rain on the roof, to stare into the orange flames of a campfire, to throw a line in the water, or watch for a beaver emerging from the lodge across the lake. In short, when he's there, he wants to do all these things that keep him from actually entering the fictional universe where his characters go about their lives. So instead, he writes at home. Paul's been doing this for such a long time, he calls it a win. He's retired now from being a wage slave in the vulgar business world where he had worked to pay bills but never sought a career. His children are grown and flown, leading fulfilling lives, which leaves Paul free to pursue writing his stories as much as he wants. Paul Lamb, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, wage slave sounds kind of I don't know, chained. Where did the passion to actually start writing come from?
Well, that certainly preceded ever working for a living. As far back as I can remember, I had been scribbling. I can
Hmm.
remember reading stories to my mother as a child, and I'm sure they were horrible, but she would nod and smile and patiently listen to them and all. Uh,
Uh,
I was always very bookish as a child. Where's Paul? Where's Paul? Always up in his room reading. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. That's where Paul would be. Um, to the point where the other kids were out playing baseball or something. And one friend in high school wrote an essay about me and said that he was envious of all my reading because it made me so well rounded. And, he's the athlete and I wasn't. And there was the implied uh, judgment. But anyway, it's
uh-huh.
always been a recognized thing. And so I was always writing something. Before I started fiction, I was what the writer Sue Hubble said, I was committing journalism,
Hmm.
which,
Committing, huh?
yeah, that was her word.
Yeah.
Um, but mostly it was feature articles for newspapers and magazines, and it was all sweetness and light, um, very fluffy stuff.
Okay.
But it was a byline, and it was a little bit of money, and it was a lot of self satisfaction. And I think I realized at one point, it took me 10 years into doing that all of my effort over that time was about the same as what one cub reporter would get done in a year at a newspaper. And
Okay.
so I wasn't doing it for the income or a career, but maybe I could do something else with this skill that I had. And so I started fiction. Fiction, I tried everything. I tried mild science fiction, mild fantasy, some mysteries. I did hadn't found my focus yet.
Hmm.
Um, and during all of that, I was a wage slave, and I was raising my family, and somewhere along the line, we acquired our piece of property down in the Ozarks, and eventually built a cabin on it. And this may or may not be the actual cabin. I'm
Oh,
not going to say that.
that's very cool.
Yeah. Um, I interviewed an author, Sue Hubble, actually, who lived in a cabin in the Ozarks, and she said, people just show up and I want to be
Huh.
your friend and that kind of thing. So when I went to see her to interview her, she wouldn't give me her address until the morning I was there. And then she told me how to, because of this thing. So I'm kind of a little less protective, but that's the motivation there. So we had this cabin in the woods, and I was writing stories about this and that, and getting them published,
Hmm.
and it was gratifying. Um, and I thought, I have this nice cabin. Why don't I write a story about that? And so I thought about it for a while, as you do, and I thought, when I'm gone, what are my kids going to do with my cabin? Let me write a story that sort of suggests what I have in mind, or an approach they could take to dealing with my legacy.
Hmm.
And so that became, it had various names, but I took a Shakespeare quote to title it to make it classy. Um, and what it is this adult son who's pretty much the protagonist of One Match Fire. He's going out to the cabin. He's beginning to clean it out and throw things away and take things home because he has to sell it to
Hmm.
pay for his father's medical bills. His father built this cabin with his own hands, and so the son is very distraught that he hasn't been a good enough provider to care for his father, that he has to give away one of the greatest things his father ever did in order to get him the care he needs. So he's very brokenhearted about that. And that sets the scene for the first novel. And that's the tension that runs through three-quarters of that first novel is, can they find a way to hang on to it? I think
Right.
that answers your question about how I
It
got down this road.
it did. It did. And since we're talking about One Match Fire, I know that fathers and sons had been one of your topics, but also coming of age. Are you referring to him making that transition from, young adult to responsible adult?
In addition to going from boy to teen,
Okay.
there's a there are several chapters. One where his father is an ex-hippie. This would be set in the early 70s, so he was still that would be credible.
Hmm.
And there's a scene where the father and the son David are out at the cabin. David's 6 or 7 years old, and they're cutting cedar trees, which one does because cedars are so invasive. And it's a hot day, and they said, "Let's go for a swim in the lake." And they didn't bring any swimsuits, Dad. We can't do that. Oh, come on. Well, where are our underwear? That kind of thing. And as they're standing in the water, ready to just wade in, the father drops his boxers, and the son, adores his father, and whatever his father does, he's going to do. So then he does as well, and they swim and they have a wonderful time. And that introduces something that comes up over and over in these stories, and that's skinny dipping at the cabin.
Hmm.
And the point of that is that it's a safe place for all the people. They can drop all their masks and be themselves and enjoy each other's company and not have to feel unsafe. So that was one coming of age story. Another is where the son David is going to start high school in a few weeks, freshman year, and something's bugging him, and his mom knows that something's wrong, and his dad sees something. So dad says, "I'm going to take him to the cabin, and we're going to work it out, whatever it is." And one of the tricks the dad has is, "I'm going to teach you how to tie this knot."
Okay.
So the boy is always busy with his hands learning this knot. And the dad says, tie that knot 10 times and you'll never forget it. So he's got the boy busy, and which is a technique a lot of people use to ease conversation. And so they're sitting around the campfire, and the boy finally confesses, "Dad, I'm worried I'm going to have to shower with the other boys in high school." Well, he's perfectly comfortable being undressed with his father and swimming and cavorting and so forth. But
Hmm.
high school, strange boys. And the dad eases him through that. He says, in about 2 weeks, none of that's going to bother you in the slightest. It's just going to be what you do. And this is part of growing up. That's another coming of age story. Uh,
In
there's
terms
another.
of coming in
Yes.
age and safe places, though, is there a coming out story too?
Do I want to spoil the ending?
Oh, nope, 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 no spoilers. I'm so
I will
sorry.
say this. That character, David, is not gay. His
Okay,
son is.
got it.
Um, His son will be, and that, and I said how the selling of the cabin created the tension for three-quarters of the story. Well, the last quarter is the son Curtis uh, wrestling with coming out to his father. So that is a coming out story.
Got
Now,
it.
the cabin is where Curtis is conceived. David sneaks out there with his girlfriend when they're both 17,
Dun dun
and
dun.
oops, yeah, and a lot of drama follows from that. But they make it work, and they have a successful marriage, and they raise a son who becomes a doctor, a pediatrician.
Well,
So there's a lot of growth, and a lot of it is directly attributable to the cabin because it is their safe place.
right. It is the place where they can explore identity and
Hmm.
unpack who they're becoming.
And feel safe doing that because they're
Right.
not going to be judged.
Right. So does that lead into book two, Parent Imperfect, with Curtis becoming an adult?
Yes. Curtis, late in One Match Fire, I introduced a brand new character, which they say you're never supposed to do. And that's a fella named Kelly. And Kelly is Curtis's boyfriend, who then they subsequently get married. And so in Parent Imperfect, it's more about the two of them, Kurt and Kelly, trying to raise their son, their adopted son, Clarkson. And Kurt is can be emotionally aloof. He withdraws a lot, and he learned that because he was trying to hide himself from his father for so long.
Hmm.
And it's sort of his default setting.
Well,
And
and
so
he's also a doctor, right?
he's a pediatrician in a nearby hospital.
Okay, so the
So he's
ability
got a
to,
very demanding job
yeah.
and long hours and that kind of thing. Um, and so what he claims is that he's not sure he can fully love a child that's not biologically his own.
Mm,
But what his husband Kelly knows is that's just a feint. What he's really worried about is not measuring up to his own father, David, the one who brought him to the cabin so much and
hmm.
taught him because he had a perfect father. In retrospect, he sees his father was perfect in every way. And so Kurt is now worried that he can't measure up to that.
Right.
So those are his struggles with raising the kid. Kelly, his husband, suffers from major depressive disorder.
Okay.
He's, we get hints of a very horrific childhood that he had. Um, and it's not quite spelled out fully, in part because Kelly won't talk about it.
Hmm.
But he has whole days where he's gone. He won't get out of bed. Nobody can talk to him, that kind of thing. So he's sort of abandoning his son on those days. And then Kurt has to step up and do things that he's uncomfortable doing, like taking his kid to school and checking over his homework and
Hmm.
explaining what's wrong with Pop. You know, why is Pop the way he is? And Kurt, who's a doctor, medically knows why, but emotionally can't deal with it either.
Hmm.
So we have these two flawed fathers trying to raise this son who's very observant. Um, and so that creates a lot of the tension in the story.
Right.
Some people have said that the character Clarkson, the son they adopted, is autistic. They've read him that way.
Huh.
I am not qualified to say that. I didn't write that intending that to be that way. I just tried to make the character as true as I could.
Hmm.
But you could say that. Now, the boy has started taking crayons and drawing pictures on the walls of their condominium. And, Kurt, the meticulous dot every I, cross every T father is fuming about that because, I just painted that wall and now it's and Kelly, who's more artistic, is saying, but the boy's expressing himself and he's working something out. And what he's doing, among other things, is drawing parallel crayon lines on the walls. And what does that say? Is that indicative of some trauma or something? and it turns out to have a very profound resolution in the story. Um,
Nice.
so, somebody who's obsessively doing that, maybe that is autistic. I
Hmm.
don't know. I'm not going to say.
Well, and kudos to you for writing a character that people can see different things in.
Mhm.
I mean, that's powerful and still maintaining your truth to the character, but allowing the reader to interpret on their own. That's some powerful stuff.
I'm glad that the reader's paying that close attention, that they are going to try to understand it in whatever way makes sense.
Hmm. Nice. So I know that in the first book, he's trying to sell the cabin. Does the cabin maintain itself through the second book?
Well, yes, it does.
I hate to spoil the first
No,
book,
no,
but
it's because that's just the sort of the setup tension for the first book. The real tension is Curtis coming out to his father,
right.
struggling with that. Yes, the father has dementia. He can't take care of himself. He was caught driving 20 miles an hour down the highway. The
Ooh.
highway patrol had to pull him on, and everybody had to scramble to get Pop out of the hospital and get some care for him, and it costs a lot of money that they don't have.
Hmm.
But then he passes away eventually. After many years of this, and it just about breaks them paying for it. He
Hmm.
passes away. So suddenly that expense stops, and they can finally catch up and get caught up on their own mortgage and things like that,
Got
and
it.
keep the cabin because the cabin is the most important unifying feature in all their lives.
Nice. All right. Is there anything about either book in the series or the series as a whole that you want to mention that I didn't think to ask?
Uh, I've tried to think of how to say this. I'll just go for it. I'm a straight man writing about gay men.
Hmm.
I'm not trying to appropriate in any way. Um, and I'm certainly not campaigning for, for equal rights or anything like that. I'm just trying to write true characters, honest characters who live properly. And I think what I have is two characters who have a healthy, committed relationship, these two men,
Hmm.
in a society that is not hostile to them. Now, I know that's not where we are yet, but I
Right.
think my role as a straight man, I'm sorry,
Bless you.
I have a cough drop. Let me do that. My role as a straight man in this situation is to do better, to try to give a vision of what our society can be if we
Right.
all try our best. So
Well,
that's what I try to do is here's a world we could achieve if we wanted to.
you're in good company. James Franco has a similar philosophy on filmmaking in that he's seen the straight love stories. He's ready to explore other things too. So
Mm-hmm.
you're in good company. And you know what? If we only wrote what we were, our books would be really flat, like
That's
really
true.
flat. And
That's true.
you've woven three, four generations
Mm-hmm.
technically into your two stories. Um, they couldn't possibly all be the same. They would be so
No,
boring if they were all identical. So kudos to you, and I'm proud having you on the show because
thank you.
we need more writers who are willing to, try. Just
Yes.
try.
Well, I think I've done a credible job with them. I tried to make them
Hmm.
people first, and a pediatrician second, or a gay man second, so forth.
Right. And that's the crux of character.
Yes, it is.
All right. Are you ready for my get to know you questions?
Oh, these are fun. Yes.
So, what is your favorite snack or drink while being creative?
I am, my doctor's not sure this is even good for me anymore, but I brew a very large pitcher of iced tea every night,
Hmm.
and I have it chilling in the refrigerator. And then I get it in the morning and I consume that in the morning sessions when I'm writing. And that's about 2 liters of iced tea.
All
It's a
right.
lot.
So, the age-old question, sweetened or unsweetened?
Oh, unsweetened, of course. Who needs all that sugar for
Right.
one? But tea has a particular taste,
Hmm.
and different blends have their own taste. So why hide it under all that sweetness? Let's appreciate it for what it is.
Beautiful. All right. What books did you read while growing up?
I was reading all over the place, trying everything. I was
Yep.
the bookish
You
kid.
you were the bookish kid. Yep.
Yes. I can remember finding the Hardy Boys mysteries and devouring those. I had dozens and dozens of those on my shelf, and then from that I segued nicely into Sherlock Holmes,
Hmm.
and I have an entire shelf over here in my bookcase, um, just of Sherlock Holmes books and books in that vein, and so forth and so on. And so that's good. But somewhere in high school, I was introduced to more conventional literature,
Hmm.
and of course, it was all English literature then. Um, and so now I can't read anything but difficult stuff. I say I've read Moby Dick 4 times, so I'm just getting started. That kind of attitude.
Yep.
But
So,
yeah, that's what I read.
as a lover of mystery, do you ever think you'll attempt to write one?
I do actually. I have written several cozy mysteries,
Oh, nice.
and they're so cozy that there's not even a murder. Yeah, there's plenty of evil men can do that doesn't
Sure.
involve murder.
Sure.
So I have a husband and wife team. They're retired and they stay at bed and breakfast and somehow stumble upon these things. And I've tried to shop them around, and no one bites. But I'm thinking I might have a little gimmick if I can have them written by my Kelly character.
Mm,
So he becomes a novelist in my stories, and unlike every other fictional writer, he would actually have published novels then. So
right.
maybe that would be a gimmick that could get them some attention. So we'll see.
Neat. Neat. All right. Who has been the biggest supporter of your creative work?
My wife, certainly. My wife.
Nice.
She reads everything, and then she will sit down with me and talk and talk and talk. And we'll have to go to lunch because we need to talk about this, that kind of thing. My daughter is secondary. None of my sons really seem too interested in my fiction. I don't know why.
Hmm.
Um, one of them is a pediatrician, so he's pretty busy.
Fair.
But that's my support team. And I have a lot of beta readers and friends who are writers.
Lovely.
It's good to have an environment like that.
Agreed. Oh, I agree completely. So, are you a morning person or a night owl?
Definitely a morning person. There was a time, a number of years, when I had 4 teenagers living in my house.
Oh no.
So if I wanted a hot shower, I had to be the very first one in the morning. So I learned to get up early. Now
Hmm.
I'm up at 3 o'clock, and I'll
Wow.
walk my dog and settle a few things around the house, and then I'm sitting down by 4 writing or trying to.
Wow.
Morning person, definitely.
Definitely. That's almost pre-morning.
Best time of the day.
So, what is your favorite hobby outside of work?
Well, my cabin in the woods. It's
Yeah.
on 80 acres. There's always something to do there, something to see. The seasons change, and you got to be there to see that. And I get out there about twice a month, which is not as much as I'd like, but
Hmm.
life intrudes.
Right.
But that'll take a good hunk of my time and wallet to be
Yeah.
a
Oh, yeah.
hobby. Yeah.
Yep. So, I know you committed journalism as well, but did publishing a book change the way you saw yourself?
You would think the answer would be yes, but no. The first story, One Match Fire, the first novel,
Hmm.
um, I didn't set out to write a novel. As I said, I wrote that first story about selling the cabin, and then I thought, well, this character's pretty interesting. I wonder if he has another story. And then so I wrote another, and they finally accumulated.
Hmm.
But that was over 10 years that happened, and I couldn't find a lot of any publisher for a while, and I was beginning to think I should just serialize it on Substack, which
Hmm.
is what people are doing, or maybe even self-publish. But then the the week that I retired from being a wage slave, I submitted it to a publisher in Wichita who wrote back 5 months later and said, "We love it. We want to do it." And
Nice.
so that's been the story since then. So has it changed me? It's too exhausting. Changed me. It's worn me out.
Fair. All right. Well, if you were to write a spin-off about a side character, which one would you pick?
There are two. One is the Kelly character.
Hmm.
He's a mess. He's had a horrible life. He's found redemption in love of Kurt, and and I'll give you a hint. He insisted on adopting a child because he wanted to prove that every child is worthy of love, and so therefore he had been worthy of love.
Oh,
Yeah. So his whole story uh, can grow from that. Now I've written a draft of that novel, and it's
do
very unconventional because it's he has a podcast where I call it Tales of My Misspent Youth, and he's just narrating his life and so forth. And it gets uglier and darker and darker. But I call it an epistolary novel for the 21st century because
okay.
he's using the podcast medium. Trying to find a home for that. And another, when we were doing the edits for these two novels, one of my editors said she would like to see the story of David's wife, the mother of Kurt.
Mm-hmm.
She's one of those strong ones who holds up the world for her men and is quiet about it. And wouldn't she have an interesting story? So I've been working on that, and I came up with something that's 180,000 words. That's
Right.
nobody's going to touch that until I win a Pulitzer or something. So I don't know what to do with that. But these characters continue to approach me with stories.
That's awesome. Well, have you ever traveled as research for one of your books?
Not intentionally. Um,
I think
I
you might fall into a category a lot of our authors fall into in that you went to a place and it inspired your work.
yes, I years ago when I was a different person, I ran the New York Marathon with my daughter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that was like the best running experience of my life. Um, and my character Kurt ran cross country in high school, so he still does. He pokes around, and he finally did get into the New York Marathon, and so I set a story there, and it coincides with the birth of the child they adopt, so everything's frantic. But I was able to use that experience, the New York trip,
Neat.
to for a very important story, a chapter in the novel.
Neat. All right, final question. How do you celebrate when you finish a project?
Novels are like short stories are like poems. They're never finished.
Hmm.
They're merely abandoned. I can't go any further. I had to got to give up on this. Um, and as I said, getting that first novel together was exhausting, a 10-year experience.
Hmm.
So did I celebrate? No, because was it finished? And isn't there something waiting anyway I should just get to work on? Now I will celebrate when I sign a book contract.
Nice.
That seems tangible and quantifiable. Here's a different day from yesterday,
Hmm.
and then it's just out to dinner somewhere nice, and, have a
Not
beer or two, and go home.
nothing wrong with that. It still
No,
celebrates the moment.
right.
Love it. All right. Well, you made it through my list.
Oh, good.
So, what's coming next? Are you working on a next project? Are you still doing interviews that people should look for?
I'm always writing stories. I've reached a point with what I'm working on right now where I'm not even sure that I want to try to publish them. I just want to get them right, do them,
Hmm.
and revisit them until there's nothing left to be done with them. I I'm shopping around some novel ideas, but only half-heartedly. So I'm not sure what'll be coming from me next.
All right. Well, where is the best place for people to follow you to keep up with updates should something spark?
Should something spark. Yeah, I have a website, paullamwriter.com.
Mm-hmm.
All my socials are linked there, and list of all my published stories are there, and where you can get the novels, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good go-to place. And I have a blog which is also linked there, which gets once a month an update. So
all right. And you're most active on Facebook and Instagram?
Yes.
Sure. All right. Any final words of wisdom?
I appreciated this conversation.
As did I.
As I said, I feel like maybe I'm intruding into a part of the culture that I have no business in, but I tried to be honest and fair about it. So I hope that readers judge it that way.
And I would like to say silos are dangerous. Welcome everybody who wants to be there.
Fair enough. I like that.
Paul, thank you for being with us here today. Me specifically.
Yes. Yeah. I hope everything's okay for Baz.
Me too. All right. We at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators and non-queer content creators. So if you enjoy learning about new artists or hearing our thoughts on entertainment media, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. The show was produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.roguepodcast.com. Tune in next week for your new media fix.
What's that? Closing time. Bum's Rush and Melody, dear.